It is another Friday night. We are at O'Gara's Bar and Grill again. That's O'Gara's on Snelling Avenue in St. Paul. Great joint with a music room in the back and about, 18, 19 bars spread around the complex. That's what it is. It's a complex of bars. I'm Jim Souhan. This is SouhanUnfiltered.com. My guest tonight, Jerry Zgoda, long time, even longer than me, Star Tribune employee, and someone who's seen it all, and by it all, I mean North Stars, I mean Sid when he was young, I mean Timberwolves, younger. Timberwolves, Wild, and who's covered some golf with me over the years, too. So we're at O'Gara's Bar tonight. I'm drinking a Guinness, and we're going to talk about all those subjects and probably some goofy stuff that comes up while we're talking. We need to get Jerry a beer here pretty quick. You can always access Souhan Unfiltered at SouhanUnfiltered.com, my website, or you can subscribe for free at iTunes, and all the new episodes will show up in your box, or you can look on it. I'm stumbling already. I've only had like a third of my Guinness, and I'm already stumbling over my words. Or at iHeartRadio. I was going to ask you about the North Stars first because I'm fascinated by the North Stars and the North Stars fan culture. But everywhere I go, people ask me, is Sid really like that? So I'm going to turn it on you. Is Sid really like that? And do you have a favorite Sid Hartman story?
Well, first, thank you for reminding me that I'm the old-timer, that I used to be the young guy, and now I've been there forever.
Believe me,
I do know him.
I've been there too.
I do know him since way back when, and actually I knew him when he was, not charming, but not quite as senile as he is now. But
you went right to senile. I thought you were going to sugarcoat it a little bit. You went right to senile.
Well,
that's the great thing about podcasts. You can be honest on them.
The problem is the most recent thing is him arguing with me the other day that the Wolves are going to take Kaminsky in the draft.
Sid loves big white guys. I remember when it was pretty close. Soon after I got here, I ended up with an argument with Sid that the Timberwolves wanted Leitner instead of Shaquille O'Neal. He said that they wanted Leitner, not Shaquille O'Neal.
I was just going to say, when he was telling me that the other night, I go, remember 25 years ago when you told me that Leitner was going to be a better pro because Bobby Knight said Shaquille O'Neal was 100 pounds overweight.
Shaquille O'Neal could have been 500 pounds overweight, and he would have been a better pro than Christian Leitner. And we all knew it, and we were all right. There wasn't much mystery there. My favorite Sid Hartman / Timberwolf story, since we're kind of in that mode tonight, was the time, and maybe somebody's embellished it, but I've heard it from so many people, the time he was walking across First Avenue to go to a Timberwolves game. He gets run over by a car. He gets up, calls the driver an asshole, goes into the press room with a tire mark on his houndstooth jacket, and says, "Some asshole just ran me over," and then he just covered the game.
I believe it. I didn't know that story. That's one of the
I've heard it,
ones I haven't
and I've heard it from a lot of people. And if it's made up, congratulations to the people who made it up, because it's such a great Sid story.
Well, there's all kinds of Sid stories. There's the classic one that's happened probably multiple times where he goes to sports media buffets before games and ends up thinking salad dressing is soup.
Well, I'll give you the specifics on that one. He is sitting there, and he's eating a bowl of red liquid, and he's typical Sid. He cleans the bowl out. He eats everything there is. Well, he didn't eat anything. Half of it ends up on his tie, and the rest somewhere in his gizzard. And then he turns to a guy and says, "That's the most horseshit bowl of tomato soup I've ever had." Sid, that was French dressing.
Well, that goes back to the 80s because he did that too in the Gophers back when he was actually, young and vibrant.
Well, this is before my time. Tell me about it.
Yeah, this was probably, I don't know when, probably sometime in the 80s. It was at the Gophers, and I think it was ranch dressing, and he thought it was some kind of cold soup or something. So he's been doing that for years.
I love that we have multiple different dressing stories with Sid. He's been around long enough to have mistaken multiple dressings for soups. Oh, good Lord. And does Sid still yell at you? Because he's given up on me. He used to scream at me, and now he just kind of shakes his head and walks by.
Well, he only yells at me to so that he can hear himself, It's not yelling at me to yell at me, but it's like it's extra volume because, he has trouble hearing. But, hey, when we're both doing this at 96...
I'll be dead, and if I'm not, kill me. Kill me. In fact, I'll write a contract out. And I'll get it notarized, and I'll bring it to a lawyer, and then I'll give it to you, where if I get to 90 and I'm still working, shoot me.
Now, can I give you a kind of an anti-Sid story?
Yes.
We always make fun of Sid stories.
I would love a good Sid story,
too. He does have a good heart. even though his job, as Royce once said, was to comfort the comfortable and afflict the afflicted.
Yes.
But this was probably 92, and my sister's husband was dying of cancer at the time. So this was down in Albert Lea. They lived in Austin, and we had like a benefit, and got like some sports memorabilia stuff together. And Sid, I picked him up. He drove all the way down there to Albert Lea, drew like the Austin local TV station. We auctioned all this stuff up, made like $15,000, and that was just one night, but it was actually a sign that beyond all the bluster, there is a good heart there.
Oh, I do believe that if you have an hour of need, Sid will come and help you. I absolutely believe that. As much grief as I give him, and as much as he drives me nuts, and as much as I don't think he's really a journalist, and he embarrasses us, and his all the above. I also believe that if your kid gets sick, Sid will go take that kid to Rochester and get him in to see the best doctor and try. Now, I guess here's my way of summing up Sid. Let's say I find out that I have a terrible disease tomorrow. Sid would come pick me up. Well, Sid's driver would come pick me up, and Sid would sit in the back seat, and they would drive me down to Rochester, Mayo to get me taken care of. And the entire time on the way down there, Sid would call me an asshole.
He wouldn't say, if he dies, would he? Another famous Sid story.
No, I haven't heard that one.
Oh, you haven't heard?
I'm not sure I've heard that one.
There was a certain sports writer who's now long since gone, but this was years ago, and he was having health problems. He did stuff in his life where you could understand where you might have health problems. And one day Sid's in the office, and we're kind of worried about him, and Sid just goes, if he dies, he dies.
That's awesome. Oh, good Lord. I actually have a top 20 of favorite Sid stories, but I can't always remember them all at the same time. I need to put them into a book, into a real book, not the bullshit that Royce wrote about.
What's number one?
See, that's the thing. I'm kind of blank. It's like I remember Sid stories in context. So somebody will mention this team or that event or that moment, and that story will pop into my head. But I don't keep them all cataloged in my brain. One really minor one one of my favorites is that Darrell Bevell, the former offensive coordinator for the Vikings,
Orville Burville.
Orville Burville. Sid wrote his name in a column to be published. He called Darrell Bevell Orville Burville, which almost as good as, remember Rumeal Robinson, the Michigan guard? He called him Rommel, as in the German tank commander.
The Desert Fox.
The Desert Fox. So we all called Rumeal Robinson the Desert Fox from then on.
Well, a copy editor once used to have all the malapropisms in print, and I don't know whatever
that
happened
crashed
to
our
it.
System, though.
Yeah, when he had.
You know what one of my favorite ones? We all know what pay-per-view is.
Yeah,
Sid spelled it P-A-P-E-R view.
Yep, pay-per-view. There's a million of them. I mean, but I wish someone still had that file.
Okay, well, as we go along, if any Sid stories pop back into your head or my head, we will offer them to the listening public.
Well, do we have the time to tell my favorite one?
We have all the time in the world, man. This is a podcast.
You know the Tommy Herr one.
I'm not sure.
Oh, this is my
Let's hear it.
This is my favorite Sid story. Tommy Herr gets traded to the Twins, right? Was it for Brunansky?
Right.
I think 88.
Yeah.
Right.
And as Brunansky told Andy McPhail later, Andy, all you did was ruin my life.
Yeah. Well, it ruined Tommy Herr's life, too, because Tommy Herr came here and was absolutely unhappy. It didn't last, more than
he's a bad guy,
the rest of the season?
Yeah.
Played the rest of the 88, so they trade in July, plays the rest of the season. He's not happy. He acts like he's the only guy who's ever been traded in the history of the game. Pouts, doesn't like it. Goes, I think, to Philly the next year.
I think that's right.
And in spring training or somewhere, he was talking about how the Minnesota thing didn't work out, that just wasn't good, fans were against him. And the quote was, the big guy in journalism up there turned the fans against him. So Sid goes on his radio show and starts ripping Tommy Herr about it wasn't him. Tommy Herr was just a baby. He was an asshole. He just didn't act, he had nothing to do with it, blah, blah, blah. So Royce hears this, and people on the podcast won't know this, but there's a guy named Dennis Bracken in our office who is the ultimate practical joker.
Yes.
So Patrick and Dennis go, we got to do something with this. So Patrick at the time had a buddy who covered the Phillies. And he got a hold of
Paul Hagen, in fact.
He got a piece of Philly stationery, and he wrote a letter to Sid from quote-unquote Tommy Herr. And the letter wrote something like, part of this may be urban myth by now, but or legend.
Go with it.
But the letter wrote, Sid, dear Sid, I still have some friends in the Twin Cities, and they told me they heard you on the radio last week, kind of bad-mouthing, criticizing me, blah, blah. And the letter goes on to say, all this stuff was taken out of context. I didn't say this, blah, 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 blah. But then it gets to the kicker. And the kicker is, besides, when I was talking about the big man in journalism in the Twin Cities, I meant Charlie Walters. Signed Tommy Herr. So Sid goes on the radio the next week and goes, I got a nice letter from Tommy Herr. It was some other guy that was misquoting him, not me.
Oh, God damn, that's good. That's awesome. All right, so as I said, if we think of any more Sid stuff, just pop it on. Doesn't have to be in context. Just spurt it out. Lou Nanne. You covered Lou Nanne, right?
Oh, did I ever?
Okay. Now, Lou Nanne.
My idea of hell with Lou Nanne was with, there was a guy named Ron Caron who used to be a general manager for the St. Louis Blues.
Mm-hmm.
And Louis would be just like superstitious. He'd be circling the chairs, and he'd be just like a caged animal. And Ron Caron was like that too. My idea of hell is sitting for eternity on a press box stool up in Met Center between the two of them.
That's awesome. Louis right now is everybody's best friend. We all love him. He's a great ambassador for the Gopher sports programs. He's a great ambassador for local hockey. He's at all the hockey games you go to. He's great to everybody in the media. And I wanted to ask you, what was he like back then?
Well, I covered him when he was GM. I don't think I ever did when he coached, but he was a character. He's the only guy all the years I've covered who, if the phone rang at 6:30 a.m., I know who it was. He'd call me up just to yell at me, just for sport. Something I wrote. He always used to call me Neggy. That was his.
Neggy.
That was his very creative nickname for me, Neggy. So if the phone rang at 6:45, if he was on a back then when he traveled all the time like he does now, but probably not to quite as warm places all the time when he was scouting stuff. But if he was on his way to the airport and he just wanted to entertain himself and he was upset about something I wrote, he'd call me up and wake me up. So luckily, David Kahn or Flip Saunders never did that. But phone rang.
David Kahn used to call me all the time.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. David Kahn used to call me all the time. Every time I wrote something he didn't like, he would call me up and try to explain it to me. The great thing was that he didn't know much basketball. So after he told me, well, listen, the triangle offense is going to work. It's going to work because we got some really good players for the triangle offenses. And Kurt Rambis knows how to coach them. So he'd start talking about the triangle offense. I said, okay, so I understand what you're saying, but how about if the defense does this, what's the third option there? And he would just be stumped. It was so easy to just it's the only person I've ever covered who really didn't know his own sport. Because let's face it, most of the people we cover, they're experts in their sport. They might not succeed, they might make mistakes, but they do know their stuff. It's just, all these other variables determine success or failure. Kahn just didn't know basketball.
Yeah, well, he wasn't qualified for the job.
He wasn't qualified for the job,
which he and I used to have arguments over, and we'd go round and round and round.
Here's the other thing. David Kahn wasn't even a good sports writer. I looked up some of his stuff. He was not a good sports writer.
You don't need to be good to do it in this business for a long time, do you?
That's either a shot at me or at Sid or both. Maybe just everybody.
Self-deprecating.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, there we go.
The other guy the only other weird guy was Pierre Paget. Remember him?
I remember Pierre.
He used to call me at like 3 a.m.
Yeah, but
this was back in the day.
He was more of a glad hander, though, wasn't he? Or did he get mad, too?
Well, no, he wasn't mad, but this was back in the day where remember when you actually used to call people and then wait for you to by the desk, and you have to wait for them to call you back?
Yes.
So this was when I'd leave them like a message in the afternoon, and then he'd call me on my home phone at like 3 a.m.
Wow. I don't, this is for our younger listeners. When I started covering baseball in 1993, I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have email. And I still remember one day, beautiful day in San Francisco. I'm in a hotel. I can't wait to get out and see the city and have a nice dinner and all that stuff. And but I had to do a story. So I called a general manager at like 9 a.m. I had to sit by that phone all day to see if the person would call me back. Cell phone, I think eventually he called me back. But, cell phones are a pain in the ass a lot because you always have to have them on and you're always accountable for having them on. But at least you have freedom of movement. Back then, you actually had to sit where you were and wait for a call back.
Oh, remember the little pink, yellow slips or whatever they were where you get messages that you could call back?
Yeah. God, we're old.
Yes,
we're so stinking old.
But, Louis was just great because he was just... he was so hyper. He was superstitious. He he thought he was always so suave and cool, which he still does. But I still remember stuff like, you're sitting there next to him, and he'd drive you nuts watching the game because he was just so tightly wound about it. But like they had a guy, the North Stars had a guy named Kent Nielsen, who was a great puck handler, a bit of a flake, and so you'd be sitting next to Louis, now from here. Can we swear on this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. He used to be sitting next to Louie, and Louie would be, all of a sudden, Kent would be coming down the ice, and Louie would be in his chair, and he'd go, shoot the puck. Shoot the puck. And he'd start to get out of his chair, he'd get more animated and aggravated. Shoot the puck. Shoot the fucking puck. And then all of a sudden, he'd sit down. Great pass. And the guy, he'd pass and score. Says, Louie, sit down and calm down.
Well, that reminds me of two things. One, Sid, and maybe it's just Sid. Sid covering a Vikings 49ers game in the San Francisco press box way back in the day. I think this might have been the game that the Vikings upset the 49ers. Anthony Carter had the big day or whatever. Reggie Rutland, he would change his name later, but a Vikings cornerback named Reggie Rutland intercepted a Joe Montana pass and returned it like 80 yards for a touchdown. Sid was sitting at the same end of the press box as Rutland when he caught the pass. And this is a long, narrow, old-school press box with a long front row and everybody sitting in folding chairs and kind of leaning forward.
Is this Candlestick or Kezar?
Candlestar. Good one. Let's go with Candlestick. Sid stands up when Rutland intercepts the pass, starts running down the row of the press box with basically step for step with Reggie Rutland. And just because he's running, he's elbowing every single guy in front of him with his left elbow as he's running. And as he runs, he's yelling, "Go, you son of a bitch! Go, you son of a bitch! Go, you son of a bitch!" Until he got in the end zone, and then he basically spiked something.
Did he outrun him?
I think he did. He's in better shape. And Lou Nanny, the Lou Nanny aspect of this, Lou was not real happy when I ripped Matt Cook and the Wild for having a player like Matt Cook when he took out Tyson Barrie's knee last year. A column made me very popular, by the way. People love me for that. And Louis basically sprinted up to me in the press box the next day to explain why Matt Cook, was being victimized. And I saw, because I had heard stories about the old fiery Lou. I got to see the old fiery Lou that day.
Well, that was the guy I covered. There's a million stories. Some of which I can't tell here. I can tell you later.
You can tell him.
But
here.
There's actually one that's kind of funny because Louis was always always thought himself as suave and very sophisticated, and he played all the angles. He had the angles to everything. So one time we're going to Quebec City for rendezvous. They actually didn't have an All-Star break that year. They had like a 5-day break, and they played a 2-game series, NHL All-Stars against the Russian Nationals.
Oh, right.
The Red Army team.
Yeah.
This was like 87. So in those days, it took you forever to get to Quebec City. You had to fly to Detroit, to Montreal. So we got on this little flight on a French airline. I don't know if it was Air Canada, but everyone was speaking French from Montreal to Quebec. And Louis got his wife Francine with him. So they're sitting there, and there's a very young, attractive flight attendant. She's walking up and down the aisle. So Louis going to
She was called a stewardess back then, by the way.
Yeah. And Louis going to impress her, and he in French, which is maybe his fifth language, I don't know, certainly at least the second, he asked her if she has any almonds in French.
Uh-oh.
And she gets all red, and she goes, "Sir, that's a personal question." And Francine nails him in the ribs with an elbow and basically says, "You dummy, you just asked her if she had any lovers instead of almonds."
That might have been a Freudian slip. We are at O'Gara's Bar and Grill on a Friday night. Jerry Zgoda is my guest. This is Jim Souhan, SouhanUnfiltered.com, drinking a Guinness. My next appearance will be Tuesday night at Kieran's, 5 o'clock, with a Minnesota United player or two. We're going to talk some soccer, but we're also going to talk some other sports. Starting that night, anybody shows up, I will buy you a pint of Guinness, including you, Jerry. Show up at Kieran's, 5 o'clock on Tuesday night. I will buy you a pint of Guinness. For the first 50 people who show up, or if 5 people show up, that's 10 Guinnesses each, I think, and then we'll all be in big trouble. But drop on by then, and the next Wednesday at the Liffey, we'll be doing a show late afternoon, probably about 4. Follow us on Twitter to get updates with Michael Russo previewing the I think, Game 4 of the Blues Wild series. Did you have any other good stories from your days with the North Stars, Jerry?
Well, we were just talking, since this is freewheeling, and we just talk about anything. Okay, well, this gets me on another train of thought. This is a Quebec City story. Because back in the day, before they moved, where'd they move? Colorado? Yeah. Back we
Nordiques.
2 or 3 times a year, and it was just it was like going to Paris, but you were going to cover a game. It was a time when during Rendezvous they used to have a commissioner, John Ziegler, very buttoned down.
Yeah, I remember.
And I was in there one night at a place called Cafe de la Paix where he was completely blitzed and had there were the Russian people who were there too, their camp, and he had a Russian fur hat on doing the Russian Cossack dance or whatever the hell you call it. So that's like one memory. But the other members covering the team is this was during the 87 World Series, and they played the Nordiques in October. And I was covering the team against the guy from the Pioneer Press named Gary Olson.
I remember Gary.
God rest his soul, who died a number of years ago. But Gary and I covered it, and Gary had to come back. This was a Saturday night game. He had to come back for Game 7 of the Twins on Sunday night. And as I mentioned before, to get from Quebec, it took like 3 mule packs, 2 trains. And so Gary had to go he had to get up like 4 a.m. and we don't leave the arena till about 11:30 or midnight, and then he's got to go through, I don't know, Montreal, Toronto, Detroit, connecting 2 or 3 times to get back. So anyways, we get back to the hotel. They stay at a place called the Chateau Frontenac, which is still there. It's this beautiful, like a castle, overlooking the city. And back then the team was owned by the Guns, George and Gordon Gunn, rich guys out of Ohio.
Yeah.
Gordon.
Who else did they own?
Well, they ended up owning the Sharks.
That's right, yeah.
The Sharks. But they owned the Cavs for a while,
right.
Like during the Ron Harper, Brad Doherty years and stuff. Gordon was blind. Gordon made all the money, and George spent it all, which I'd love to have George. Because
I need a rich brother.
George was like the guy who, Gordon lived in New Jersey near Princeton, and George lived out in the Bay Area, and he was like involved in the arts, and he was just a great guy. But what a life. So we get back to the Hotel Frontenac, the Chateau Frontenac, and there's George after the game, and I didn't even remember who was coaching. Maybe it was Lauren Henning by then or whatever, and all the coaches, and George is there. And so Gary and I start talking to him, and Gary said, I got to get up at 4 a.m., blah, 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 I got to go this, the violin story and the sad story. And George just looks at him and goes, I'm flying back to San Francisco tonight. I'll drop you off. So Gary gets with him. They go to the airport. They get on this private jet. George basically says, I'm going to go to sleep. Here are the DVD, the VCR. You can watch whatever you want. Middle of the night, Gary's home. Doesn't have to go through 3 different things. Now, where you could argue professional journalistic ethics, but at that point, hell with that.
Yeah.
He got on the plane, and
that's a hard offer to pass up, I would say. How different is the Minnesota hockey world of the Minnesota Wild as compared to the Minnesota North Stars? How big a culture shift was that, or is that?
I haven't had a ton to do with the Wild. I've done just
You've observed
a little bit, but the biggest difference is just how the change in the salaries. Because I remember when they drafted Mike Modano in 1988, he actually didn't play that next year. He went back to juniors for a year. But I remember sitting, at the time it was Jack Ferreira who was the GM. And I remember sitting, this was Louis' old office at the Met Center, and they basically let me stake out. I was sitting in the secretary, Sue Thomas's secretary waiting room, waiting to see what was going to happen. And this was like they were trying to get Modano into camp. They were trying to sign him, and they're in Jack's office. And all of a sudden, I just hear this screaming in the office back and forth between the agent and the GM. And this is the number 1 pick of the draft, and they were screaming because Ferreira went crazy because the agent, Howard Gorwitz, or I don't remember his last name, had the gall to ask for a $200,000 signing bonus. and all of a sudden it just caused this, just expletives, and you could hear the walls shake. And, those guys were as close to, even covering the North Stars or the Timberwolves in the early days, it was almost like, obviously we weren't on the same level, but it certainly isn't like it is now. Back then they were an expansion team, the Wolves were. Those guys just wanted to get in the league. Scotty Brooks was here the other night trying to get in the playoffs for the Thunder. I used to go to ice cream with Scotty Brooks. You would never go to ice cream with Anthony or with Andrew Wiggins or Zach LaVine anymore. You go out with Todd Murphy, or I played golf one time on the road with Sam Mitchell, Sidney Lowe, and Doug West, and they stuck me with Sid, who was just learning the game at the time, and trying to watch Sid around the greens was like watching a tennis match, back and forth and back and forth. But back then it was a different culture. Now you could never, but back then, and when I covered hockey, these guys weren't making much money. I think even back in that day, Louis, he probably wouldn't admit to it now, but he'd have guys on 2-way contracts, and he'd send them down in paper only to the minors, so he wouldn't have to pay them for 3 days, even though they were with the big league club and they never went to the minors.
No question about it. Such a different day. And these days, I don't sometimes when you talk about the old days versus the new days as far as, access and talking to players and player journalist relationships, all that, it sounds like you're complaining. I don't blame the modern athlete for not having the same relationship with us because there are too many of us. In the old days, it really was just a couple of beat writers, maybe a TV guy who dropped by once in a while, and almost all your conversations were one-on-one with people. You talked about their families, you talked about their private life, you might go have a beer with them. It was very relaxed, and then you try to get as much out of them as you could once the tape recorder went on, but the tape recorder wasn't always on. Now, some guy stands in front of his locker and 40 people surround him. You're not going to have a human conversation with those people.
The new head of the Players Association is talking on every subject.
Yeah.
She's very vocal, and one of the things that came out a couple maybe a month ago or so about you can get the idea now that there's it's not coming out of a vacuum. There's a push from players now to get rid of pregame access, so you're not in the locker room because supposedly we're eavesdropping on conversations. And as I said. I suppose you could bring them out if we want to talk to them, but that's the last place anymore that you can
have a casual conversation.
You bullshit with people, get to know them and talk and chat with them. Otherwise, everything's either in group settings or, Wiggins probably did a handful of one-on-ones this year. Everything else is, in the old days, you'd get to know them and they'd get to know you, and you're right. And part of that is because, there's a million bloggers now who are now credentialed and they're having a tough time deciding who's legit and who's not. And, people in there and there are people in there who just sit there and don't ask any questions, and
there are team employees who are doing on the interview sessions.
Yeah,
there are handlers watching over them. There are people from the team website and the team radio station, the team all there, and the team partner local TV station is always there with a camera. So there just aren't any unfiltered moments.
Well, now you got guys like Wiggins. I don't think it was all year, but. His agency, Bill Duffy's his agent, they'd have a personal assistant who would come in and, spend time here, weeks or days at a time, and, basically be, he's 19 years old.
The team used to do that stuff.
He's got a personal assistant,
Man.
You didn't have that 25, 30 years ago.
No, you didn't. And, that is one thing I still love about baseball, and in particular spring training. Spring training, it's that way. You walk up to people, you have a one-on-one conversation. Actually, you get to the season, and it's harder to do. I still try to talk to people one-on-one when I can, but it's just not as easy as it used to be. But enough bitching from us. Let's talk a little bit about, you and I both covered the finale the other night, and I tried to characterize this with my column. It was both a horrific season and maybe one of the most promising junctures in Wolves history. If you disagree with me, tell me, but give me your assessment of what they are and where they are.
Well, I just actually had a email exchange with a friend who said, none of the stuff that Flip did made any sense. Trading Corey Brewer away for nothing, trading Mo Williams away. It makes perfect sense.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. The thing is, you got to go through the pain. Now, the question is, if you are a beaten-down Wolves fan, you'll say, what's the point of it? Because you're just going to get screwed in the lottery, and the guy's going to get hurt. It's not going to matter anyways. But if you take that away and say, basically, when all those guys got hurt in November, when Rubio goes down, when Pekovic goes down, when Martin goes down, and there's no way in hell they're going to, compete to be 500, let alone even sniff the playoffs. By the time those guys come back in January, or turns out some of them were February, are pretty close to it. By that time, you had guys who were on one. Well, they had outs. Brewer had an out. I think Mo Williams was on an expiring contract. Thad Young had an out. These guys weren't going to stay here. Once you're committed to all of a sudden to this rebuilding process, so Flip said, let's be bad. We've got a guy who I think Wiggins could be a star, a superstar. Levine, if we get lucky, could approach that. There's a draft, pretty good big guys. There's going to be 4 or 5 good players. And, you can call it tanking, I guess, if you want. I don't believe that players ever went out there to throw games.
Right.
The game they won in Utah where they're playing with 7 guys and they win in overtime. And Flip goes off afterwards about the Utah broadcasters because it's a tanking. But certainly, it was a philosophical. He even admitted it Wednesday night. It was a forced change, and that's.
Bless you.
Excuse me.
It's all right.
And it was an organizational change, and those moves made sense in the fact of what is the point of winning 3 more games or 6 more games or 8 more games? They finished where, people will say if they don't win the lottery, it was all wasted. Well, the whole point wasn't to get that extra 5% chance. I mean, the odds, you're rolling the dice there. If you win it, great. The odds, the purpose, as Flip kind of said the other night, was it sets the floor for them. They now know they can't draft any worse than 4.
Right.
They can't go to 6th or 7th and end up with Corey Brewer in a year where there's Kevin Durant.
Right.
If they get luck, now the odds are, I guess if you go with any individual slot, the odds are most likely that they end up with 4, but you congregate it, there's still a much better chance they end up with a top 3 pick.
Right.
And, even if they get 3rd, I mean, depending on the draft order, if Philly's above them or some other team, they still could get one of the big guys.
Right.
I mean, there's no guarantee, I don't think, that the 2 big guys go 1-2. I think it depends on need. Maybe Russell goes 2nd and Okafor's still there at 3.
Of the top players, the players they're most likely to choose from, who would you want them to get?
Well, I haven't broken down the film and done all my draft work and done all my interviews yet. But, I'm a little hesitant that we hear for months that Okafor is the guy. He's the best guy in this. And all of a sudden you get to March and it's Karl Anthony Towns is the guy because of the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes me, Wolves did that. They talked themselves into Derek Williams because of that 36-point game in the tournament. They talked themselves into Johnny Flynn because of that Big East tournament game, the triple or double overtime when he goes crazy. I mean, I know this team has sucked defensively forever, and Towns is the better defensive player. But you just look at Okafor, you look at his hands, watch him hold the ball once. It's like he's holding an orange. Usually those guys, Kawhi Leonard's the same. He's a guy who, they just grab the ball and hold it. Plus, I think in the pro game, you put him down low, and who's going to stop him?
Right.
You're going to have to send 2 or 3 guys at him. The guy's 19 years old. Maybe he doesn't play defense now. I don't think that means he can't. He's probably lazy. His body's going to change. You work with him on that stuff. I have to see more. Admittedly, I didn't see a lot of Towns this year, just partially because he was not buried, but, Kentucky had all those other good players. And most of the games in December and January and February, I was watching Okafor because he was like the number 1 guy. Right. But he just looks to me like an NBA star.
He has the body and he has the skills. I thought it was interesting when you and I were talking to Flip the other day before the game. He mentioned, why about drafting Levine. He said, well, we could have just taken like the best polished player available at that point, but we went for the home run. Levine, with his athletic ability, was the home run swing, and he might have hit it. When he started talking about going for the home run, that made me think Okafor, because, I think Towns might be better as a rookie, or he might improve your defense immediately. But if you're looking for the home run, Okafor could be Shaquille. He could be a superstar.
Well, the other key thing to remember is, and I don't know if he mentioned it the other night, but in the month on the road with them, in the last month, as the tournament comes by and as each round I'd ask him, what he thought about the games and stuff, the term he kept using was body of work.
Yep.
You don't determine everything on 3 tournament games or 4 tournament games.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that means they've been watching these guys for years. They've been watching them at the Nike Hoop Summit a couple of years ago. They've been watching them in high school games, at least a little bit. So when he says body of work, to me, that means that he's looking at a guy like Okafor just because, he's the guy who's. I mean, they've been talking about him forever, like they were talking about Wiggins, at least for a long time.
Right. We are at O'Gara's Bar and Grill. It's on Snelling Avenue in St. Paul. We're here every Friday that I can get here, every Friday that I'm in town. I've been traveling a lot lately, and anybody who wants to come by and say hello, I'll always try to have a gift available for you, a book or something else, if you want to stop by and say hello. Also, please check out MNEYE.com, Minnesota Eye Consultants, if you have any vision or eyeball concerns. Or we'll be having Dr. Samuelson from Minnesota Eye on next week to talk about his practice and their business. It's located in Bloomington, but also located all over the Twin Cities. What is your view, Jerry, of Tyus Jones? He was a great high school player. He was a great freshman. He basically won the national championship for Duke. How does he translate to the NBA game, do you think?
Well, I mean, people here get a little probably maybe skewed.
Provincial?
Yeah, they think that, that this guy's probably, the next NBA star. And I certainly, as I mentioned, haven't done all my work, but there's just the stuff you look at. He's probably a late teen into the 20s. He's a first-round pick.
Yeah.
But he's a guy, he's probably, maybe he's a career backup. I don't know if he's got the foot speed or the athleticism to be a great player. Certainly he has the savvy. He's a great passer. Now the question is, The Wolves only have their pick, which will be top 4, and then they have 2 high second-rounders, but they have no other first-rounders, which people will lament over the whole, they didn't get that.
Right.
But that's a whole other story in the Love trade. But, I suppose they want Fancier would want Flip to go get another first-round pick and go get him. One reason that would make a little bit of sense is he's buddies with Jahlil Okafor.
Yeah.
If you go and get him.
Yeah.
But I still think this team with Rubio just signing the big contract, I still think they'd probably go and sign a veteran point guard.
That makes more sense, I
whether
think.
they're bringing a guy in who's 19 years old and you're really putting yourself back. But that's something to consider. But I've never really got the sense from Flip that, he's going to be champing at the bit to go out and get another pick to get him.
Right.
Although people here would love it. That's even on Twitter I got a couple things, are they going to draft him? And I think a couple people were even thinking with their top 4 pick.
God, no. No. I love Tyus Jones. I love the way he plays. I've always loved the way he plays, but you have to be realistic. And he's going to have to really, and he made big shots in the NCAA tournament, he's really going to have to develop an outside shot to be a valuable asset in the NBA, I think.
And, the whole question is, how quick is he? Will he be able to stay in front of guys?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Now that we have plenty of time and space between the Kevin Love departure and now, give me just kind of your best big-picture assessment of Kevin Love as a player and a guy, and do you see the Cavaliers winning big with him there?
I still think, people want to write it off as, it was a completely lopsided trade for the Wolves. That Kevin Love was the big baby here, and that's it's a disaster in Cleveland, and he's going to leave. He's going to be a Laker next year, and it's going to look like one of the worst trades ever in the history. All I say to that is there's still 2 months to go in the season, and I still got my gut or my instinct still tells me that there's still time for the Cavs. For them to use him and figure it out. And,
right.
Maybe it's only been 6 months. It's only been a regular season. Chemistry and all that stuff takes some time. It wouldn't surprise me in the least if all of a sudden during one of these playoff series they figure out how to use Kevin Love and he becomes a major factor. I mean, in fact, I was trying to come up with my picks today that we always do for. I did like a playoff preview story on the Warriors. We were there in Oakland last week, and so I picked it up, and I was trying to figure out who do I want to pick in the finals, and everyone's picking the obvious Golden State, and I ended up picking Cavs over the Warriors, and it would just be fitting, wouldn't it, if they got beat by Kevin Love, the guy they didn't trade for in a season when they won 67 games. I know that may sound like a reach, but sports, that's the thing that's great about sports. It's filled with these weird storylines, and I still got a feeling that a team like the Cavs can figure it out. It's easier coming through the East than it is the West, and I still think there's time for them. It's certainly possible he ends up with the Lakers or elsewhere, but I don't think it's a slam dunk yet. Let the season play out. Let's see where the Cavs do. Let's see if they win a title before you decide he's going to go and play for the Lakers or whoever.
Right, and I have all the same qualms about Kevin as everybody else. I also was in London, and I saw him just subjugate himself to the team and play a role and play really good defense on Pau Gasol and be a rebounder and a defensive player and a team player, and they would not have won that gold medal if he hadn't done that. Now, I don't know if he'll behave the same way if he needs to in Cleveland, but as unlikable as he tends to be, I would not write off his chances of winning a championship with that team.
No, I mean, I think there's a lot still. This is a completely different game now. They're starting tomorrow, and we'll see how it turns out. Maybe it turns out that they even relegate him further and just say go away. But I just got a hunch that at some point he's going to become a major factor in this. He is for all his whininess and kind of prima donnas. He's still a good player if you figure out how to use him. And Chris Bosh, when the season started, said this is going to be difficult. Get ready for it because it's going to be hard and it's going to take time. And playing next to LeBron when you're power forward like that. And he was right. It turned out that way. That doesn't mean it's going to be like that forever.
You know Flip pretty well. You've covered him for a long time, off and on. Now he's owner, president, coach, GM.
Grand
Poobah, tank commander, somebody referred to him recently. What do you think's going through his head right now? How committed do you think he is to coaching long? It certainly sounds like he's a coach next year. How committed do you think he is to coaching long term? How much do you think he really wanted to coach, even though he pretended to go out and look at other coaches? What's going through his head now?
Well, I don't think he's going to do it, for 4 or 5 years, although it's certainly possible. I mean, and I think if Tom Izzo changed his mind tomorrow, we might have a press conference in the coming days or weeks.
That's his guy?
Well, that's the guy. He really worked him hard. I mean,
okay.
I don't think people, and now in retrospect, looking back at it, at the time we didn't know it, but I think looking back now, I think he got further along, and I think he thought he was closer to getting Izzo than anybody thought he did. People just thought it was like a cursory call, and Tom said no. I think he put a lot of work into it, and I think it got down to pretty close where he was thinking he might be able to get him. And I also know that he went and did talk to Billy Donovan, and he did, Hoiberg's another guy. So if he could get that, or if the Bulls fire a guy like Thibodeau, and you could get a shot at like him, that might change his mind and change the timeline. But the other thing is that he's put in this year. He's worked with Levine. He's worked with Wiggins. He's gone through the pain of it. Unless he can hit a home run with a hire like Izzo or one of those guys who are at the top of his list, I don't see him walking away from it. At least not next year. I mean, they do have options. They could promote Sam Mitchell, but I just don't see that happening. Maybe 3 years down the line when Flip wants to step back, but I still think if he could get a guy he really wanted, and I'm not even sure Dave Yeager was a guy like that. I don't think he was on that top list like Izzo was, but if he could get that, they're friends. Maybe at some point Izzo just says, hey, I'm 60. This is my last chance to do it. Let's try it. I've got 2, may have 3 number 1 draft picks on a team.
Yeah.
What would be better than go working for his pal? I mean, it's not it's not impossible. It's probably unlikely, but it's not out of the realm of possibility.
That's fascinating. That's good stuff. I suggested the other day that instead of continuing to kind of be an interim coach, give Sam Mitchell a try, just in case he's the right guy. Why not try it out instead of just if Flip's eventually going to get off the bench, why not get off now, see if Sam's the guy, and if Sam isn't, then you replace him with the best guy you can hire next year.
Yeah, I just think the spirit in Flip is too strong.
Yeah. I agree with you. I'm saying I disagree with Flip on this one.
Yeah. But I just think I think he wants the payoff. He's coached these guys.
I agree.
They got their heads beaten in this year.
Yep.
He wants to see what happens if he can get guys healthy. They add another lottery pick. Can they have a little honey to go with, just getting your head crammed in for 6 months? Yeah,
and on a human level, I certainly understand that. Fred Hoiberg, because everybody always expects the Timberwolves to hire the person they know and love, Fred Hoiberg is always the hot name among fans. He's popular. He was a good player. He's been a great college coach. He's, everybody kind of expects him to go back to the NBA at some point. Now he's going through open heart surgery. What are the chances of him ending up coaching the Wolves?
Well, a lot of that depends on. Actually, he's having it today. So
okay.
That's out to him for that, because who knows how that impacts his career? What happens? I mean, hopefully it's just just another step of what he went through 10 years ago, and it's the next step to continuing to live a normal life. But with that stuff, you never know. So, but I do think in time, when he gets to a different point in his life, like Steve Kerr got to a different point in his life where his kids were growing up and said, I want to coach now, that Hoiberg comes back to the NBA, because I don't think he likes the recruiting the whole life of college.
I don't blame him.
And I think the Bulls are one team that are waiting to see what he's going to do, because I think if they part ways with Thibodeau or whatever, they've always kind of been hot on him. So that's a possibility, but it makes sense here. I mean, he's got a relationship with, obviously with Flip, but he's got a good relationship with Taylor. He could get his membership back at Hazeltine, which I know he enjoyed greatly. And I think just for people who know him, I think that he would like being able to have summers again. As an NBA coach, you get a little bit of that. As a college coach, you don't really. That you go back to having a little time where you're not it's just not all encompassing all the time. So I think it's certainly a possibility. Now the question is he the right guy? He's never coached in the NBA. The other factor is if Kevin Garnett does end up owning this team, for the next coach, you got to think that there's probably some sort of Garnett factor in it. There's a Flip factor now. Hoiberg, there would be a factor. I'm assuming they got along, but they were teammates. Sam Mitchell, there would be a factor for sure. So that maybe raises the probability of that happening a little bit, just because his relationship with KG. That's why Izzo doesn't have one with KG. So I don't know how that factors in. But that's
Izzo yelling at KG. That could be one of the great moments in pyrotechnic history.
We'll see. Would he? Would he yell at him?
That's why I don't know. I think he would. I think it's in his nature to yell at players. I mean, that is to me what separates Izzo from so many other coaches. Is Izzo yells at his players about everything, and yet they still love him. I mean, that is a great skill. It's a great, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of coaches in the United States, high school, college, small college, CBA, NBA, who know X's and O's. The guys who succeed know how to deal with human beings. Izzo has a great gift for being hard on his players and having them love him for it. And the question is, would that happen in the NBA? Would that translate to the NBA? Because I always go back, I got a buddy who knew Karl Malone, right? Or covered Karl Malone when Karl was with the Lakers. And I think it was when Mike Montgomery got an NBA job. And Mike had been kind of the bespectacled, uptight Stanford coach. And he goes to cover, I think it was might have been the Warriors.
Yeah.
And so my buddy goes up to Karl Malone and said, Karl, how do you think a guy like Mike is going to do in the NBA? And Karl said, well, and Karl has a Louisiana accent. He said, well, in college, if you tell a player to do something and he tells you to go to hell, you bench him or you take away your scholarship. In the NBA, you tell a player to go to hell, what does, and to quote Karl Malone very accurately, what do he do? I mean, the player tells you to go to hell. The player's under contract. The management probably cares more about the player than he cares about the coach. You're screwed. You better have a way of operating. And that's been one interesting thing about Flip is Flip has come under criticism at times during his career for being too much of a player's coach, and Mike Yeo has come under criticism sometimes for being too soft, or playing Suter on the first power play, and deferring to his veteran players. But the reality of pro sports is, if you can't get along with your star players, you don't have a job.
Well, that's why Popovich has been so great, that he's been able to have some discipline, but he's been able to get Duncan to buy in for all the years, and that he was able to be tough on guys like Ginobili and Parker when they came into the league, and busted them because I think he earned the trust of Duncan, and if Duncan fell in line, then those guys fell in line.
Right.
And, that's probably one of the key to his success of how good they've been for so long.
Where'd you grow up?
Where did I grow up? Let's see. I was born in Michigan, but barely lived there. Albert Lee and Burnsville.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, I was an Air Force brat. Moved about 12 times. Ended up. My first place here was in Burnsville. Then moved to Lakeville, bought a house, and then now I'm living downtown. Did you stay by choice, or did you stay because that's just where the job was?
Well, I was actually a professional intern. I did 4 different internships.
Really?
Yeah. I did. My first internship was. I think they still do it, but it was a Dow Jones Wall Street Journal collaboration, and it was for copy editors. And you would apply, and they picked like 40 every year, and they'd send them to papers all over the country for the summer. So you could end up, if you were chosen, you could end up at the Detroit Free Press, or you could end up at the LA Times. I ended up at the Sharon, Pennsylvania Herald, which is right next to Youngstown.
Oh.
And it was the home of, who was it? It was a Vikings lineman, Randy Holloway.
Oh, okay.
It was his hometown. Sharon, Pennsylvania was his hometown. So it was one of those things. It was a great learning experience. I'd get up at 5 in the morning. I'd be the first one in there at 5:30 doing the weather page and doing all the layout stuff, writing headlines because it was an afternoon paper. And then I'd work till 1, and then I'd go home and sleep because I'd gotten up so early, and then stay up, watch TV and stuff. And this little dying steel town in the edge of Pennsylvania and Ohio, and I did that for summer. And then I went back to school, and then I didn't want to be at school, so I got a winter internship, public relations actually, at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs.
Wow.
So I went out there for a winter, and then I got my big break summer internship at the Boston Globe, and then the next summer after that, the Miami Herald. So that by the time I got done with college, I didn't have to go to Podunk like a bunch of my friends had to do, go to little papers in upstate New York and work for $10,000 a year. They got discouraged and quit. My first job out of college was, I was already known. I had a guy named Vince Doria, who was the ESPN. He was the Boston Globe sports editor. Yeah. So I had his name on my resume.
Wow.
And so my first job out of college was Arnie Robbins looking to hit a home run like Flip Saunders with Zach Levine. And I was hired to do the North Stars when I was 23.
Wow.
And one of my favorite stories is we used to have a copy aide named Kent Big Happy Youngblood. You might know him.
I do remember that young man, yes.
And he was a copy aide at the time. And I remember my first or second year covering the North Stars. I covered them the first 4 years. I was 23. I was like the young prodigy, and now I'm the old fart. I remember Kent walking by my desk one day, and now he claims it was in jest. It wasn't in jest. he looked at me and goes, "Why'd they hire you?" and he just kept going.
Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome. This has been great. Great stories. Now I want to segue to a segment that I do when I have people on for the first time, just to get a sense of you and your tastes and talk about something other than sports a little bit. Let's go to broadcast news. Give me your favorite or a favorite television show.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I didn't let you study for this one.
Yeah,
you got to go gut.
I don't watch a lot of TV. You know, it's weird. I watch stuff like Chopped and Landscapers Challenge and stuff like that. You know,
Stacy watched Chopped a lot, so I by association watched Chopped a lot.
You know, like I'm really unhip because all the current shows. You know, it's like back in the day I'd watch MASH and all that stuff and all that.
God, you're old.
That thing, yeah. But you know, but now, you know, and actually I don't feel that old. I just came off the season. I feel pretty good, even though it was this grind and it was a horrible.
Well, you look good.
Horrible year.
You look healthy.
So, but yeah, I'll watch. You know, it's like, what do I? DVR, it's all kind of that kind of stuff. It's just like, you know, home stuff, a little bit of cooking stuff, even though I changed my diet a year and a half ago and I don't eat meat or dairy anymore. So, but I still watch the shows.
It's funny. I changed my diet. Now all I eat is meat and dairy.
Is that? Are you paleo? Is that?
Well, I walked around my entire life with a runny nose and terrible headaches. My entire life. I mean, I had 5-6 headaches a week. I would kind of get the sense that a headache was coming. It was like a cloud descending, and I knew my day was ruined.
Gluten?
And my entire life went through this. And so finally last year, Stacey said, you got to go see somebody about this. So I went to an allergist, and they gave me some allergy medicines and sinus medicines that greatly lessened my headaches, my problems, but didn't eliminate them. And then I was talking to my chiropractor. He's like, everybody, 90% of the population is gluten intolerant, or either terribly allergic or a little allergic. So I just cut out bread. I basically cut out bread and pizza, two of my favorite foods. It's like I feel so stupid because I didn't have to go through 50 years of feeling like crap. I could have felt good all those years if I just known because I never wanted to be the guy who was gluten intolerant. You know, I didn't want to have a label like that.
There's no shame in that.
But
Amelia Reno is way ahead of the game on you because she's in her 20s and she knows she is.
Oh, so. It's such a different. And you know the other thing is, like, I'm drinking a Guinness right now. I really, there are certain beers I can't drink, but like, you know, I can drink Guinness. I can have a whiskey or a bourbon. I feel great the next day. I used to think I was a lightweight, that I'd have one beer and I'd feel terrible the next day. I thought it was me. It's the ingredients.
You weren't one of those columnists who the only thing they drank were wine coolers, were you?
No, and I never will be that guy either, by the way. And I'll give you my view on this, and it's a show I've talked a lot about on the podcast. Justified ended this week, and Stacey and I watched the finale last night. One of my favorite series of all time, based on Elmore Leonard, one of my favorite writers of all time, and one of the great finales of all time. Pitch perfect. Brilliant. It wasn't a great last season because they were trying to tie up too many things at once. Justified.
What's it on?
FX Network. You can get it for free now or on demand or whatever. It's one of the great written TV series of all time. One of the great scenic TV series of all time because they put you in the middle of Kentucky and you know you're in Kentucky. It's fabulous. I highly recommend it. Favorite movie? It doesn't have to be the favorite movie, but a favorite movie.
I always have to come back to Shawshank Redemption.
You're such a guy.
You know, it's just. I mean, you know what it is? It appeals to the writer in me. I mean, just the writing in it.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
And the thing about it is
character.
And I don't want to come off as a metrosexual or whatever. The uniqueness of it.
You're safe here.
It's a love story.
Can I have a Corona, please? Thank you. Sure. Thank you.
It's a love story.
I just ordered you a Corona, but it's really a Guinness because Guinness sponsors the show.
All right. It's a love story about two guys. You know. Very, very unique. You don't get very many movies about that, and it's one of those things. There are a few things that they come on, and I'll watch it, and I'll keep watching it. Like Hunt for Red October is another movie.
That was really well done.
I'll sit and watch it, even though I've seen it a million times. Princess Bride. I mean, me and Kent will walk up and down. Kent Youngblood will walk up and down the fairways, being guys repeating lines from that. And I just read the book, Carrie Ellis.
So you and Kent are two guys in love, just like Shawshank Redemption.
Although some days, one day, if you ever played with Kent, have you played with Kent?
Yes, I have. Kent and I do not have compatible golf personalities.
Hopefully he doesn't know how to access a podcast.
He doesn't. Don't worry about it.
Because the one thing about Kent is he never has learned. He still makes the rookie mistake. If you throw your club, never throw it behind you.
Right. You got to throw it ahead.
So you can just pick it up on the way. So one day he's in one of these moods, and he's just steaming. He's mad, and he hits a shot, and he's just ready to go off, and he goes, unbelievable, just ready to pop. And I go, I do not think that word means what you think it means. And he looks at me like he's going to bury a 7-iron in my forehead. And he didn't, thankfully. But he was the guy also on Facebook, when you sign up, there's a place to put your favorite quotes. And I didn't know what to put. So one of my quotes, I think it's still on there, is my favorite quote from him after making 3 pars in a row. I think this is at Chaska Town Course. He gets up on the tee, proud as can be, puffs out his chest, and goes, I don't get mad anymore when I'm playing well. Way to go, Cat. When I'm playing well, I don't get mad. Yeah. It's like when I'm 3 under par, I'm never usually pissed off. What a test of his character.
Oh, really? By the way, this show is part of the Alive and Social Network, and on usually when I'm in town, I do a show 5 or 6 o'clock at O'Gara's, and then starting at about 9 or 9:30, they will do live karaoke as part of the network, also in the Shanty, which is attached to O'Gara's Bar and Grill. And I know was going someplace with that. Jeff, that's where I was going. Jeff Dubé does a podcast on this network. Jeff Dubé, when I first got to town, I played golf with him occasionally. Jeff Dubé almost killed me.
When he's a Minneapolis Country Club?
But this was back when he was begging free rounds wherever he could find them. I think it was North Fort Links or whatever it's called. We're up there, hit a bad shot on a par 3, took his 7-iron, and snapped it across the upright stanchion on a golf cart. The head flew off and whizzed by my ear at about 100 miles an hour.
Ooh.
He almost killed me.
That's not good.
Because I wouldn't have had a chance to kill him back. I would really would have wanted a chance at revenge then.
Are you actually sponsored by Guinness?
Yes.
Can I tell a Guinness story?
Our sponsors are Minnesota Eye Consultants, Guinness, the Cara Pubs, which is Liffey, Kieran's, and the local O'Gara's Pub, and we're working on a couple others.
Really quick one to tell you that we did a golf trip, Kent Youngblood, a guy named Derek Simmons from our office, and a photographer named Tom Wallace. We went to Ireland for 12 days, 2002, back when the exchange rate was 90 cents, not $1.30 or whatever. It's now $1.17. People think it's great. Get off the plane in Dublin. The first place we go is the Guinness warehouse factory. And we're driving this van with the stick shift, and Derek has about 6 Guinnesses. And I'm going to drive out of there, and I'm fairly sober, but I can't drive a stick shift. It's like I tried getting through 2 city streets, and they go, screw it. And they put, good thing there wasn't a cop. We made it to our destination, but that was living dangerously after we get out of the Guinness factory. We drove about 30 miles through left-hand side of the road through Irish traffic and made it to where we were going.
Well, I'm hoping that the association with Guinness is profitable on both sides and lasts, because I think next summer we would love to do some kind of promotion where we do podcasts from the Guinness factory in Dublin. We've discussed that possibility.
Could you get like Paul Houston as a guest?
Who's Paul Houston?
Guy named Bono.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I'd forgotten that was his real name. I knew that at one time. I had forgotten. I'm sure Bono's free. It won't be a problem.
They're all over Dublin.
Absolutely.
You can't turn around without seeing them every
year. Actually, what was the documentary? It's going to get loud in here or whatever. Did you ever see that one? It was Jack White,
The
Edge,
with Edge.
And Jimmy Page.
Yeah. That was great.
That was interesting. It was really interesting to see how the Edge worked. How he'd go play to the ocean. That's pretty awesome.
There was also a great U2, I don't remember the name of it, but it was about 3 or 4 years ago. It was basically about how they basically broke up in the 80s and this disunity, and how they came together with the Achtung Baby album, and specifically how they saved themselves by writing the song.
Yeah.
It was a really good documentary.
I'll have to look that up. The one thing I love to do on flights is music documentaries and concert footage, so I will have to check that out.
I went into a Knicks game a couple weeks ago at Madison Square Garden, walking there 3 hours ahead of time, and there's a woman standing there, and I go, how do I know her? I know her. And I realized, I don't know what she was doing there 3 hours before the game, but it was Darlene Love.
Oh, wow.
The singer who, did you ever see 20 Feet from Stardom?
No, but I saw.
That's a Netflix documentary. Watch. That's great.
Oh, cool. Because Springsteen plays with her a lot. He likes her.
I think he's on that.
Yeah, he likes her. He's included in her some albums. He's hooked her up with other artists. He played with her at the 25th anniversary Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is one of the great concert videos of all time. You ever seen that one?
Which one was that?
It's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 25th anniversary concert. It's amazing. It's because it's not only like 20 of the greatest artists of all time, it's 20 of the greatest artists of all time playing with each other and playing each other's songs. So you have Lou Reed playing with Metallica. You have Stevie Wonder playing with Sting in a mashup of Roxanne and Higher Ground, which is one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. You have Springsteen playing with Fogerty, Springsteen playing with Billy Joel, Springsteen and Billy Joel doing the New York song. I'm blanking on Billy Joel's
New York State of Mind.
It's Springsteen playing with Darlene Love. It's Springsteen playing with Sam from Sam and Dave. It's U2. It's U2 playing with Springsteen and Patti Smith. It's it's Mick Jagger playing with U2. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Two Guinnesses. Nice to see two Guinnesses show up. It's one of the greatest rock and roll concert films of all time. It's unbelievable.
Is it as good as the Prince snippet of him playing While My Guitar Gently Weeps?
It is of that caliber. Prince playing guitar on While My Guitar Gently Weeps at a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame concert is one of the great moments in music history. It's unbelievable. He's up there with all these Hall of Famers, and he kicks their asses.
And Harrison's son, too, right?
Yeah.
The look on Harrison's son's face
it
was unbelievable.
Yeah, God, I wish. My daughter works for First Avenue. As a Springsteen guy, I know that Springsteen plays benefits and local bars in Asbury Park and other parts of New Jersey all the time. He'll show up and just play. Or if some guy is touring, he'll bring him to Jersey and they'll play in a bar. I wish Prince would do that. Show up at First Avenue, surprise people once a year, and just jam.
When I was in college, I lived in a really crappy house on Cedar Avenue. But I lived with a bunch of guys. We all worked together at the Daily, including the music critic named Eric Lindbaum. So Eric knew all the stuff, and now Eric lives in L.A., but he gets this tip that one night, if you call up, it was a night in November, rainy night, you call up First Avenue and you just listen to the recording, who's playing? Tonight playing is Controversy. You show up, place is half full, nobody knows about it. It's Prince warming up to open for the Rolling Stones the next Saturday.
Wow.
And he didn't have any of the costumes, none of the loincloth, any of that crap. He just played a set and a bunch of other stuff. Controversy was just coming out. It was like the most memorable music night. We were just standing next to the stage, and he's playing for an hour and a half. Then he goes to the L.A. Coliseum 5 days later and gets booed and shit thrown at him.
Wow!
Because he was open for the Stones, and the people didn't get him. But that was one great rock memory.
The Colts-Bears Super Bowl in Miami. I was down there, and I think it was I can't remember if Kevin Seifert was still working for us or not, but Kevin Seifert and I were there, and Prince was the halftime guest, and he was great at halftime. He played great, but those guys always do the halftime act always does a press conference sometime during the week, and it's usually just horrible. It's usually sports, it's like 5 foofs, and by the way, vocabulary lesson: foof is a term we use for the airheaded, mindless broadcast media member who just asks stupid questions. So 5 foofs will show up and ask stupid questions, and the real journalists won't go, and it's just horrible. Well, this is Prince. So Seifert and I say, we got to go see Prince. Even if he's terrible, gives a terrible press conference, we got to do it. We show up, and the room's pretty full, but it's a press conference room. It's not a rock hall or whatever. Prince walks out, goes, no questions, brings the band out, and plays for half an hour, and it was phenomenal.
Oh, that's a way to get the press on your side.
It was awesome. And then it was great at halftime show, too. The guy is brilliant. I just wish he gave us a little more of his brilliance on a little more regular basis. Any final thoughts? Any stories you want to tell? Any stories that popped in your head while we were talking?
I've got to hit the gambit, haven't I?
That was tremendous stuff on all the different topics. I appreciate it.
Is that the only question you asked me about what's my favorite TV show?
Yeah.
Or my favorite movie?
And Shawshank Redemption. Yeah. I think you did very well, Jerry. You're going to get all kinds of gold stars for this.
You should ask that survey they ask at the end of After Studio.
I never made it through an actor studio. What's the survey?
Oh, it's a guy. Some French guy did it. Like your favorite curse word, favorite this, favorite that. And at the end of if heaven does exist, what do you hope God says to you at the pearly gates?
Okay,
that's the same thing they ask of everybody.
Answer that question.
Well, I guess the only the simple answer. He says, "Welcome."
That's pretty good. See, I don't have high hopes. I just hope my exit isn't. I hope my exit is down a gold escalator, not being thrown out by a godly bouncer. That's the best I can hope for.
I hope mine isn't eternity spent sitting in a press box between Lou Nanny and Ron Coleman.
You've made that clear. Thanks to Jerry Zgoda, Timberwolves writer for the Star Tribune, but has also covered a lot of other things for the Star Tribune, including golf. We've done a bunch of golf majors together. Great writer, has been covering the Wolves and taking a beating doing that for a long time. I'm hoping for your sake, for the paper's sake, for Minneapolis' sake, and for the sports fans' sake that the Wolves actually do turn around. I do think this could be really fun really soon.
Yeah, I do too. And you think at some point it's got to get better, doesn't it?
They can't have it. Mathematically impossible for them to continue having the luck they've had. And I don't think they're as dumb as they used to be, which helps also.
Depends how much you believe in the curse.
Yeah, I do believe in the curse, but curses don't last forever. At least that's what I'm going with.
Well, I'm all for that too, because I'd actually like to cover something that's fun one of these days.
Absolutely. Jerry, thank you very much again. Jerry Zgoda, and your Jerry Zgoda Strib, or I can't remember your...
Just Jerry Zgoda.
Just Jerry Zgoda, yeah. So you can follow Jerry at Jerry Zgoda on Twitter.
No A in there.
Zgoda. You can also find his stuff in the Star Tribune and at StarTribune.com. Obviously, I appreciate him coming on. Again, my next appearance, Tuesday, 5 o'clock at Kieran's with Minnesota United. We're going to talk soccer and other stuff. The first 50 people to show up get a free Guinness. I am buying you a Guinness if you show up. Next Wednesday, Russo and I previewing Game 4 of the Blues Wild Series. We are at O'Gara's. We are drinking Guinness. Please patronize our sponsors, Minnesota Eye and the Cara Irish Pubs, the local Liffey and Kieran's. And thank you to O'Gara's for having us, as always. We'll talk to you soon.